at Langley Air Force Base in 1965. Let me play this little short clip, and then we'll get you to comment on that.
Sure.
My name is Carl Wolf, and I was a precision electronics photographic repairman with a top secret crypto clearance in the United States Air Force. I was stationed at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. In 1965, in mid-1965, I was loaned to the Lunar Orbiter Project at NASA on Langley Field. Dr. Colley was in charge of that project. They had problems with a piece of electronic equipment that was bottlenecking their production of photographs. I went to the facility, and when I walked into the facility, there were scientists from all over the world. I was stunned, actually, to see people at a NASA project from all over the world. It didn't make any sense to me initially. I was taken into the laboratory where the equipment was malfunctioning. I couldn't repair it in the dark. I asked to have it removed. Airman second class was in the dark room at that time. I was also an airman second class. I was interested in how the whole process functioned, how the data got from the lunar orbiter to the laboratory. Asked the young man if he described the process to me. He did. About 30 minutes into the process, he said to me, in a very distressed way, by the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And then he proceeded to put photographs down in front of me, and clearly in these photographs were structures, mushroom-shaped buildings, spherical buildings, and towers. And at that point, I was very concerned because I knew we were working in compartmentalized security. He had breached security, and I was actually frightened at that moment. And I did not question him any further. And a few moments later, someone did come into the room.
Sheldon, I know you've talked about the moon before on the show, and I believe you told us the moon is an artificial structure, but that at one time it also had a thriving ecosystem. Can you tell us about our moon?
Okay. Let's talk about the moon from the beginning. The moon at one time was the outer of 5 moons that surrounded a planet that's now destroyed, that is the so-called asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. When this happened, the moon was thrown into an orbit between ourselves, Earth, and Mars. Roughly around 25,000 years ago, the moon was used because at that time Earth had 2 moons. One of the moons was going to be used to destroy the surface aspects of Lemuria. That was done, and the moon, because the planet was still in full conscious aspects, it needed 2 moons to balance it. This moon was then brought in, and it was made the second moon again. When Atlantis fell, and it fell basically because of a mistake by the Atlanteans were trying to destroy their people who were exiled and where today is basically modern Greece and Italy. And what they did was the scientists who were disgraced because they were not willing to continue with the human experiments that were being done and had been there and exiled were able to destroy Atlantis by taking that remaining moon of the 2 moons that was being used to destroy them. They basically caused it to go and destroy Atlantis. It went back upon the trajectory that it was supposed to go upon. And as a result of that, Atlantis was destroyed. And it immediately, the energy of the planet changed because the firmament started falling out of the sky. And this is the first flood. The second flood, which is the final destruction of the firmament, is the one that happens roughly about 7,800 to 8,200 years ago, which is the great biblical flood that's described in the Bible and in other various stories of ancient legends around the planet that refer to this whole process. So we then had the moon left. Now the moon, when this planet was destroyed, and people have various names for it. The one most people know as is Maldek. The one they are having me use right now is Pax, because it's the goddess of peace. And when they reconstruct this planet, they want it to be all about peace and the new energies of consciousness of this new star nation. But anyway, getting back to the moon. So the moon, because it had been destroyed, because it was a battle moon, a defense system for this giant planet, which was roughly about 3.5 the diameters of our planet Earth, it was now in orbit around our planet. Now it's hollow. The inside of it used to be a battle station. The closest to describing this to people would be maybe you go to the memories of it. I think Lucas and the people who helped write the so-called Star Wars movies remembered in their memories, their deep memories about all of this, about this great battle planet, and the fact that these types of instruments were used in these huge galactic wars that went on for millions of years. They're now done. We're in a period of peace. We're in a transitional period. So he remembered all that stuff. Star Wars, to me, even though they made it a galaxy far, far away, was really a remembrance of the kind of stuff that went on in our galaxy for millions of years. And the immensity of it all is unbelievable. Science, when they were discovering various energy anomalies throughout the known galaxy, discovered that the largest anomalies were in the constellation Orion. And, of course, I had been talking about that when it was suddenly discovered in the mid-'90s. But what all of that is about warping space, creating specially ridiculous radiation centers and all that stuff. I'm not going to get into all that negative stuff, but I'm just going to say it exists. It's remnants of these wars. And what happened is the moon was completely destroyed. It was basically burnt. But what happened is over the period from the ending of Atlantis to the present, both the dark and the forces and the light forces used the moon for bases. And, of course, all of this ended, as I've explained to people, in the mid-'90s when we had this Treaty of Enchara. Enchara was the dark energy, kind of similar, if you know Star Trek, to the Q. It was a continuum of darkness that was using all the aspects of the particular galaxy we live in, the Milky Way galaxy, for their own amusements. What happened was they finally decided, under the pressures of the light, to carry out a prophecy that had been done at the beginning of the creation of this particular galaxy. And so as a result of that, there was a peace treaty signed between the forces of Enchara, the dark forces, and the light. And the result of that was that things began changing on our planet. Now, when we go back to the period of the Apollo projects and the period that this guy's talking about, which is the 60s and the early 70s, what we're seeing here is in the midst of this great disaster going on the moon between the light and dark forces, and this funny little kind of Cold War that was going on, in which the United States was being used as kind of a intermediary. And the result of that was Apollo 13, which was attempting to carry illegal plutonium to the moon so the dark forces could use it to destroy the light bases on the moon. So what we have here is a person who has seen some of these pictures of what was going on, and the fact that there was a consortium of scientists. I got involved in this whole process way back in the way back in the 1980s. I had a group of scientists who originally developed projects for looking at alternate energy, how to bring that to the planet, how to make it possible. And we've gotten involved with space because a couple of the people who I was involved with were the sons and daughters of people who were major scientists for NASA, for instance, and for other space programs throughout the world. We began seeing that in the 86 with the return of Comet Halley, that there was a sudden change in how things were going. Like, for instance, you had the famous speech by then President Reagan about the fact that an invasion from space would cause a great unity on our world to occur. And we saw that there were people looking around, and that's how I wound up with the Galactic Federation again, is that I was contacted in the midst of all this little games going on back and forth between the light and the dark, and there was a companion to Comet Halley, which is called Comet Wilson. Comet Wilson was originally coming in masked, not the real Comet Wilson, but masked as a ship that was doing all kinds of braking maneuvers. And so some of them got out their father's old NASA computer programs and discovered that what was happening was that Comet Wilson, quote unquote, was really a ship, and that it was braking against the sun the same way they were using their models, because of course the only thing they could be assured of in any kind of thing they were trying to create was to use our solar system, since it was the only one at that time where they knew that had planets in it, and that you could tell by specific gravities and mass of different planets and of the sun exactly how to produce certain effects with a craft coming in so that it would brake properly and be able to go into Earth orbit. And so what they were doing was replicating all those programs and seeing that what was happening in our skies, actually way out in space, and the deepest parts of our solar system was very similar. So I was able to see how there were consortiums still going in the 1980s, which were there in the 50s and 60s, of looking on what's going on in space, using all our resources to try to discover what was exactly going on out there. And so what he was seeing on the moon was similar stuff that I was told again when I finally got in contact with the Galactic Federation in the late 1980s. And so as a result, I was able to talk about things going on the moon. But this is part of a process. And so you have to almost go through the various histories before the Treaty of Inchara, this little war going on, which was more like a Cold War, because the last 200 years of it were just skirmishes going on in one part of the galaxy or another. So in our case, this little skirmish involved the moon and Apollo 13, which is a totally erroneous story that they put up in Hollywood. It's a magnificent lie. But anyway, the moon is indeed an artificial world. It had bases on it, both light and dark, until the 1990s. We had established through the dark a number of bases up there, because the forces that were running us were the dark. We had a dark cabal that was running our planet, still is, but is losing its power right now. And as a result of that, they were more allied with the darker forces of this galaxy, and were being used by them vis-a-vis the moon. So the Apollo project really had two basic differences from what was announced, which was, one, they were attempting to help the dark extraterrestrials, and two, they were trying to use that to gain certain advantages about the nature of the moon and about the nature of technologies that could help them in maintaining their mastery of the planet. So that's really what, in a nutshell, and I've left a lot out. I mean, I could talk for half an hour to just get everybody up to speed, but what we have here is just that. From a point is, yes, he was telling the truth. The Disclosure Project is explaining to people the vastness of what these dark operations, these deep secret operations were actually doing.
Well, Sheldon, what I'd like to do now, if it's okay with you, is I want to play some short background music, and then you can take a break and fill up your water, go to the restroom, and everyone can kind of relax just a little bit for a couple of minutes. And then when we get back, we'll pick back up. Is that okay with you?
Sure. All
right, let's take a little break, listen to a little music, get some water, take a little break, go to the restroom. We'll be right back. This is Ohio Exopolitics.